Hello, and welcome to another Golf Week That Was podcast. It seems like a while since I've been sat here. We'd not managed to do a podcast for the last 2 weeks. I'll have a quick explanation of why that was. But as always, this is a live podcast. Please get involved in the live comments. You can be part of this discussion. You can be part of the show. You can help shape what we talk about. Give your opinions. Your opinions might be completely different to mine. That's what it's all about. Please get stuck into the live comments. Okay, what are we going to talk about this week? I've got a little bit of housekeeping to do. Quickly about my golf week. We've got the WGC Matchplay that was played over the weekend. Also, the Corrales Punta Cana Champs, which was another PGA Tour event for all the players that didn't qualify for the WGC. We're going to have a quick look at the LPGA. I always like to give the women and the ladies tour some coverage. And we're also going to talk about the ball rollback, which has probably been the biggest talking point in the world of golf in the past week. And also Gary Player has had some very interesting things to say about the majors. So we'll have a little look at that as well. So let's just get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way first. Like I say, we haven't done a live podcast for a couple of weeks. I've been away in Jupiter, Florida, playing some golf and generally just enjoying myself is basically what I've been doing. Went out there to see my brother. We did some filming, which I'll talk about a little bit more when I talk about my golf week. So came back from there and then was just really, I'm catching up with work on the day job and jet lag. And then just when the following Tuesday came round, I just, didn't have any time to prepare and just decided actually it was probably better to not do a podcast rather than do one. Feeling jet lagged and not done all the right amount of research that I like to do before a podcast. So that was the reason I didn't do one last week. But we are back this week. So, quick bit of housekeeping. Just quickly, viewers who've been watching Grant. So anybody who don't realise, Grant, my brother, is a full-time professional caddy over in the States. He's got his own series on the Scratch at 50 channel called Caddy Stories, where he gives you a bit of an insight into the life of a full-time caddy. And in the first 2 episodes of that series, it was with his pro golfer that was trying to qualify in the Monday qualifiers. Well, Chris, his pro, has qualified for this week's Corn Ferry event. And Grant won't be caddying for him because he's had to get up to Merion Golf Club, which is his summer location. And the tournament is in Chile, so it's not actually just around the corner. It's obviously quite far away. But anyone who is interested and watched the Caddy Story series and is interested in following Chris's story, then keep an eye out for him this week in the Corn Ferry event. And we certainly hope that he's going to do really well. And also, there is a Caddy Story episode coming very soon, all about the caddy migration. So again, many of you may not know that hundreds of caddies every fall or autumn head down south to Florida for the winter season, and then in the spring they all head back up north for the summer season. So Grant's next Caddy Stories video is about the caddy migration, which is I think you'll find quite interesting. The life of a full-time caddy is far from normal. It's a great life, it's a hard life, and there's a lot of traveling involved, so keep an eye out for that. Also, next week on the podcast we will be doing a Masters preview. It'll be mostly a Masters preview. We'll look a little bit back on what's happened. There's a live golf event this week, so we'll probably have a little talk about that. But it's going to mainly be a Masters preview show next week. Okay, my golf week. Well, as I just alluded to, I was very lucky. Spent some time out in Jupiter, Florida. Grant organised some amazing golf for me. It was just great. I played 5 rounds in 4 days. Now, I played 3 very exclusive country clubs where I wasn't allowed to film. These places. So the one where Grant is a caddy is called Loxahatchee. You've probably never heard of it. It's one of the most exclusive golf courses in the world. And there was just no way that we were going to be able to film there. I didn't want to make the members I was with feel uncomfortable. I didn't want to get Grant into any trouble whatsoever. But fortunately, Grant did get us permission to go down late one evening and do a quick bit of filming. Now, the filming we did is there's 3 holes at the Lochahatchee Club, which are 3 of the hardest holes in a row you will ever wish to play. And that video has gone live last week. I honestly think it's up there with one of the best videos I've ever done. So please go and watch it. You'll see what a phenomenal course it is. The condition of that golf course is off the charts. The tees are better than most greens that I've been on. And these 3 holes are called the Turtle Trap. And we did a video where I played all 3 holes off the championship tees. Now, I've got a little taster video for you to watch here. So this might just give you a little taste of what's going on with that video.
Okay, we like to call these holes the Turtle Trap. First one is a 550-yard par 5. We've got water all down the right. As you can probably see, we've got bunkers down the left and a little bit of, obviously, trees down the left. Today, it's straight downwind. Right. Let's just try and hit your little bleed off the traps on the left.
Okay. So, just so everyone knows, we're playing right off the championship tees as far back as you can go.
We're going to play these. We're going to play this Turtle Trap off the tips. Yep.
So there you go. Oh, I didn't realise we still had that on. Sorry about that. Let me get rid of that timer. There we go. Yeah, sorry, forgot to get rid of that. So, yes, I hope that gives you a little taster of the video we did at Lochahatchee. We were very fortunate to be able to film there. And it is an absolutely phenomenal place. So the Turtle Trap video, I would highly recommend going to watch that. It really was something fantastic. Okay, so I managed to play some golf. You know, it was great to play some golf in a very condensed space. I feel like it was really good for start of the season. You know, we are nearly there now. It's the weather in the UK is getting a little bit better, but it's still not great. But the first medal is this weekend. I've not made a decision yet on whether I'm going to play in it, just purely because the weather forecast is pretty bad and the golf course is still in pretty, I don't want to say poor condition, but it's still in winter condition. Because we've had so much rain, the course is very wet. It's very, very soft. The greens are still not the best. So I may leave it another week before I play. But anyway, I'll make a decision on that soon. Okay, so let's get stuck into the last golf week. So we normally go and start with the professional tournaments, but actually this time we are going to start with the ball rollback, because I think that really is the biggest talking point from the last week for sure. So, we've got some comments in already. Fantastic. Thanks for joining us and thanks for getting involved. So Kent, a very good, loyal supporter of the channel. Thanks for your support, Kent. Welcome home to a wet and rainy UK, Craig. Yeah, you're right. I didn't want to come home. I really didn't want to come home. I was really depressed sat in Orlando Airport. But, you know, unfortunately, you have to come home at some point. But yeah, hopefully, you know, the weather in the UK. I was looking on the long range forecast, and the Easter weekend is not looking too bad at the moment. So I've got fingers crossed that it's going to be okay for that. Mason, I was down in Tampa area at the same time. The weather was excellent. It was. I mean, Mason, is the weather ever not excellent at that time of year? I mean, you know, the hurricane season has passed. The humidity is down. You know, every day I just woke up and it was just an absolutely beautiful blue sky, sunny day. It was just it was an absolute joy. I had an amazing time. So, yeah, I'm very lucky to have, and you know, apart from the golfing experience that Grant organises for me, just to spend some time with my brother. We're very, very close. We get on extremely well. We talk to each other every single day. A day never goes past where we don't talk to each other. And to go out there and spend some quality time with him, he managed to, you know, organise his loops and get some time off. So we really did get to, like I say, spend some time playing golf and going out for meals and everything. It was just phenomenal. I just had such an amazing time. And it's all down to Grant. He organises everything for me. He gets members to host me at these courses. I played the Loxahatchee Club twice, and then I got an invite to Dye Preserve, which again was just a phenomenal golfing experience, but one of the hardest golf courses I've ever played. I mean, it's built on a swamp, this place, and like you've literally got fairway, swamp, and there's water everywhere as well. So, but you know, the condition of these courses and the way you get treated is pretty amazing. So anyway, okay, so let's get onto the ball rollback. I've done a little bit of research, so let me just give this to you first, and then please get involved in the comments and let me know what you think. Okay. So obviously, the USGA has come out and say that they're planning to roll back the ball and bring the distances down that the pro golfers hit it. Okay. Now, I must admit, my sort of golden era of watching professional golf was when I was, you know, obviously a lot younger and growing up, and I had my heroes. My hero was Seve, always will be Seve. That guy, in my eyes, is just an absolute god. I just love that man to bits. I watched the documentary on him recently, and I was just in floods of tears at the end of it. It was just, you know, it was amazing. As a viewing experience, it was amazingly uplifting, but it was terribly upsetting at the end as well. You know, when basically he knew that he was, you know, it was incurable and, you know, he was going to die essentially. And people were going to visit him knowing that it was the last time they were going to see him. You know, but, you know, Seve was my absolute hero. And obviously you had Faldo at that time, Greg Norman, American players. I mean, you know, Jack Nicklaus was still playing some good stuff then, but, you know, Curtis Strange, you know, all that kind of era. Nick Price. I remember if there was a 440-yard par 4, you know, these guys were having to hit long irons into those holes. I remember them, you know, having to like hit a, you know, absolutely buttoned 5-iron or a 4-iron to these par 4s. And like now, it feels like professional golf has a little bit almost got like a bit of a pitch and putt competition because they drive it so far now that they're just flicking short irons into every hole and hitting irons in, you know, onto par 5s in 2. So I can kind of understand where they're coming from. But let me just give you these stats. So the average driving distance, so obviously that era I'm talking about there, I'm going to say was like mid-90s, okay? So the average driving distance on the PGA Tour in 1995 was 263 yards. That's total driving distance. We're not talking carry distances here. All of these stats I'm going to give you now are total distance. So the average driving distance in 1995 was 263 yards. And the player that had the highest average was John Daly, with an average drive for that year on the PGA Tour of 289 yards. Okay. Now, the average driving distance is 298 yards. That's versus 263. And Rory McIlroy currently has the highest average driving distance of 326 yards. So over the last 27 years, the average has gone up by 35 yards overall. And between the two longest hitters, being John Daly then and Rory McIlroy now, it's gone up by 37 yards. So 35 yards overall and 37 yards with the two longest hitters. Now, I don't know about you, but for some reason, I expected it to be more than 35 yards. But when you think about it, 35 yards makes a massive amount of difference because 35 yards could be 3 clubs, couldn't it? You know, so that's where, you know, the difference has happened. And the difference has happened because of equipment. But it's not just equipment, is it? You know, if you look back in the 1990s, if you watch an old, you know, PGA Tour archive from the mid-1990s, and you've got Ernie Els and Colin Montgomery and Faldo and, like I say, Norman. And I mean, Seve was, you know, obviously getting near to the end of his good play then. But, you know, you wouldn't exactly describe those guys as athletes, would you? I don't think those guys were spending a lot of time in the gym. And that was why when Tiger came along in 1997, that's why he caught them all on the hop. One, he was insanely talented. but also he was an athlete. You know, he went into the gym and he worked out, and then obviously that's now had an amazing effect on the golfing profession because they all do it now. You know, whereas he was the sort of pioneer and the only one, they're all in the gym now. They're all working hard. So, you know, the driving distances and the distance they hit it have gone up because of the athleticism of the golfers now. It's not just the equipment, you know. So I'm also interested to know what you think about, you know, the pros having different equipment to what the amateurs use. Now, I don't know whether you saw, there was a quote from Tiger Woods. Now, admittedly, this quote was in 2017. So I think that was when there was the first murmurs of, you know, the governing bodies holding back on the equipment on the pro level. And Tiger actually came out and said that he thought that the pro equipment should be limited and that the amateur equipment should be totally unlimited. Just let the golf manufacturers go and do whatever they want to do and just let the amateurs just go and have a great time. And I thought that was a really interesting comment. Can you imagine what, if you just said to the manufacturers, just go and do whatever you want to do? You would, obviously, you know, the shackles would be off for the amateurs, wouldn't it, as well? So it's kind of like, you know, what's the best thing to do? Is it to just roll back the equipment for the pros? Or do we roll back the equipment for the pros and then just let the amateurs get given, you know, let the manufacturers basically design whatever they want for the amateurs and just let them, you know, hit it a lot further? And, you know, I would imagine it would be on the drivers, giving them trampoline faces and stuff like that, I would imagine. I don't know. What do you think? Firstly, so Kent says, golf, I'm all for bifurcation. We haven't the land for them to keep this up. Roll it back. Ball striking will be key. It was what Jack talked about for years. Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting thing, isn't it? Obviously, there's been a lot of talk that the Augusta National have to go and, I think they had to actually purchase some extra land, didn't they, to take the 13th tee back to try and turn that into a par 5. I mean, we mustn't forget that a par 5 is supposed to be a 3-shot hole, and if you're going for it in 2, you should be going for it in 2 with a pretty long club. You're not supposed to be going into par 5s with 6 irons and 7 irons, for sure. And I think the 13th this year at Augusta, with what I've seen and where they've put that, you're not going to be able to sling it round the corner now. So your tee shot is going to be finishing pretty much in the same place that it used to finish back in the 90s and the early 2000s, which was like, you know, you never got past that. Remember where Phil Mickelson put it on the pine straw at the end of those pines? Well, you never really got past there. And I think that's going to be, you know, the case again. And then, you know, it's going to be a lot more scarier shot for the second shot into 13. It's definitely going to be a lot more of a risk and reward rather than, you know, a fairly mid-iron into that hole. So if they roll back the ball, what does Augusta National do? Do they carry on playing off that tee, or do they have to move the tee back forward again? But I think, you know, I think I said it on one of the last podcasts, you know, to turn a golf course into a true test for pro golfers. So par 5s would all be 3-shot holes. Long par 4s would be required to hit a 5-iron or more into the hole. Par 3s would not be, you know, wedges and 9-irons. You would have to make a golf course pretty much on 9,000 yards, which sounds ridiculous, but it's absolutely true. So I do think they need to do something. It'll be interesting. I personally don't think that it's going to change the fabric of world order in golf. I still think Rory McIlroy is going to be, and Scotty Scheffler and John Rahm, they're still going to be the best players in the world. They're still going to have that advantage. I mean, there is an argument to say that actually you're going to be hurting the shorter hitters a lot more than the longer hitters, because the longer hitters will still probably be able to reach the par fives in 2, although they will be able to hit a slightly longer club. But maybe the slightly shorter hitters, it's taking those par fives completely out of range, and so you're actually making it easier for the better players in the world to dominate, if that makes sense. That there's a definite argument for that, for sure. So I do think they need to do something. Whether I'll be interested to see how far they go. Just how much are they going to knock off? I mean, are they going to knock 35 yards off the golf ball? I'd be surprised if they did. But I've not looked, to be fair. I don't know whether anyone's seen what their plan is on how much they are actually thinking of rolling the ball back. It'll be interesting to see just how much they're going to do it, because it's like in Formula One, isn't it? In Formula One, they always bring in new rules for the cars, which makes the car's lap time come down. But within a year or two, those teams find a way to get record that car under those rules, recording the best lap times again. And I just think that, that will probably happen. I think, they'll keep working harder and harder on their club head speed, and the golf ball will come back to, not far off the distance it is now. Maybe I'm a little bit out there, but I think the analogy is right in many ways. So, yeah, yes, I agree that they need to do something, but I'm just not sure how far they're going to go. Bill Malik, thanks, Bill, for joining in. The fact we can play from different tee boxes means there is a buy and try qualification already. Yeah, it's just, it's. Obviously, there's absolutely no plans for the manufacturers to be allowed to make golf equipment for amateurs with the shackles off. That was just Tiger Woods' opinion that that's what he thought he would do. His take on it was that it would make golf a lot more exciting and a lot more enjoyable for the amateurs to have such amazing equipment to use, and it would maybe attract more people to the game, I think was his take on it. And I suppose there's quite a lot of truth in that. If TaylorMade and Ping and Cobra and all of a sudden brought out a driver for amateurs to use that actually did, and all the YouTubers, I don't do equipment tests because I've just got fed up of seeing golf driver come out and it's just exactly the same as the last one. In performance, it's all a bit boring to me now, so that's why I don't do them. But if genuinely the shackles came off and those guys brought out a driver and it actually did put 35 yards on your drive when you caught it out the middle, that would be quite exciting, wouldn't it? It would make you go out to the golf course thinking, wow, what am I going to do today, kind of thing. So, I think what Tiger's saying there is quite true, but like, where does it end? If you took the shackles off completely, these golf manufacturers might come up with allowing the amateurs to hit it an absolutely crazy distance. And then what does that do for the pace of play? Because are you going to be waiting longer on the tee to be able to hit your shot, which means then that rounds get even longer? There's so many layers to this, isn't there? But I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here because there's no plans for the shackles to be taken off. It was just what Tiger Woods says. Kent, golf, that's only a 10% rollback at 35 yards, Craig. That would work. Yeah, I didn't work it out as a percentage, actually. So yeah, I think, in my opinion, they need to roll it back to that kind of point. Would seem to make sense. I'll have a little delve before next week's podcast and see whether I can find anything that actually does say what their plans are on what the percentage might be that they're planning to roll the ball back. Also, I don't know how you do it. How do you roll the ball back? How do you take it? You take some compression out of it, do you? I don't know. Maybe the dimple pattern changes to make it spin more. Well, I've got no ideas. Anyone, get in the comments if you actually have an idea of what you actually do to roll a ball back. I think it's something to do with the dimples. I think if I remember right, it makes it spin higher, which makes it, not carry as far. But it might be something with the compression as well. But obviously, very, very interesting to see that they have actually, it would appear that they are committed to this. Also, I thought it was quite interesting that every golf pro came out and was absolutely fuming about it. Justin Thomas, John Rahm, I mean, you name them, all of them came out and they were like, no, this is a terrible idea. I don't want it to happen. Yet Rory came out and was all for it. I think that tells you a lot, actually, because I think he knows that it is actually going to benefit him. It's going to benefit his game. It's going to make him even stronger in the world of golf, I think. So, I do think they need to do something. I think the pro golf game is becoming a bit more, a bit too much. When I sit and watch the golf now, it just feel like it's a bit boring just watching them hitting short irons into. I do obviously appreciate the skill and the athleticism and what these guys can do. It is phenomenal, but it does get a little bit boring. It does get a little bit boring when you're just watching them just hitting, short irons into every hole all the time. Kent, go back to a Balata. Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? That would be interesting. I know what I'd love to do a video with an old Persimmon club and a Balata golf ball, just to see. I mean, it would just go absolutely nowhere, wouldn't it? So yeah, I mean, I remember those days. I used to love the Slazenger. Do you remember the Slazenger Balata? I used to love that golf ball. Everyone used to play the Titleist, and there was a Maxfly, the Maxfly HT. It was called High Trajectory. Everyone tended to use those golf balls, but I just like to be a bit different, and I used the Slazenger Balata, and it was a good golf ball as well. Mason agrees with Kent about the Balata. Kent, make them play the Maxfly HT Balata. Yeah, that's what I just said. I remember that golf ball. That was a cool golf ball. Isn't it a shame what happened to the Maxfly brand? It was obviously owned by Dunlop. That was a phenomenal brand, and they made a lot of great golf balls back in the day. It's a real shame that a lot of those brands have just completely disappeared. So yeah, let's keep an eye on the rollback. I'm sure we'll be coming back to it in future podcasts. I mean, everyone who's in the comments seems to agree that it does need to be done, and it looks like it is going to happen as well. So yeah, let's reconvene on this one. Before we get stuck into the pro golf, let's also just talk about what Gary Player has come out with. I don't know whether he was asked to list the major championships in a list of importance, or whether he just came out and said it. But let me find his quote. I've got his quote here. Here we go. So this is Gary Player's quote. But never mind the Masters, the Open, that's the British Open, is by far the greatest tournament on the planet. I rate the Open at 1, the US Open at 2, the PGA, the US PGA, 3, and Augusta, the Masters, 4. They're 4 marvellous tournaments. The Masters is the youngest of the majors. The others are steeped in tradition and history, and they still have to catch up. Nothing comes to the top without time. So he's saying that the Masters is the least important. I don't know whether important's the right word. With the least tradition. Is that what he's trying to get at? I don't think he's saying that the Masters is the one that you should want to win the least, because that's definitely not the case, for sure. I mean, for me, the US PGA has always been the 4th major, the one with the least importance. And I mean, going back to the 90s when I used to play, no one really cared who won the US PGA, to be honest with you. I mean, anyone in the comments who's of my kind of age group, I'm sure you'll agree, no one really cared about the US PGA. It really was all about the Open, the US Open, and the Masters. So to say that the Masters is behind the US PGA is, I mean, obviously got a lot of respect for Gary for what he achieved as a player. There's a lot of people out there who don't like him. There's a lot of people out there who think he's a cheat, and we probably won't get into that. But there's certainly some very dubious video evidence from the past, but that's all alleged, I have to say. But you can't take away from the fact that obviously he's played a pivotal role in the growth of the game of golf with him, Jack, and Arnold Palmer. But I have to say, I just can't agree with what he's saying here. How you can say that for me, and obviously you've got all the US viewers. Please understand that I'm a UK golfer, so I'm always going to say that the Open is the biggest and the best, and it is the oldest. But I would have that as number one. But I would have Masters as the number two, and then I'd have the US Open closely behind as number three, and the US PGA is a distant fourth for me. So I'm not quite sure what Gary was trying to get at there, to be honest. He is, he does like to be a little bit controversial, shall we say? Bill. Gary has always been a bit whacked. Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether he's had a little bit of a checkered history at the Masters recently, wasn't there? There was that thing when he was the honorary starter and his son was caddying, and on the photo he was holding up a brand of golf ball or something like that, and he got severely reprimanded for it, and I think his son got banned from the Masters. So I don't know whether there's a bit of beef there as well. I don't know. But I just don't see how, you can say that the Masters is, below the US PGA. It just doesn't make any sense. Maybe he's just trying to keep himself in the limelight, and he knew that if he said that he was going to get a lot of column inches and be all over social media and stuff. Maybe he's a lot smarter than we give him credit for when it comes to, social media. Okay, so let's get stuck into the pro events from this week. So obviously it was a big one with the WGC Matchplay. So basically this, unless I'm mistaken, and get in the comments and tell me whether it is or not. Just quickly I don't like to miss anyone's comments because it's great that everyone's getting involved. So Mason, growing up, the PGA was not really thought about, at least not until John Daly won. Yeah, you're right. You know what? You are absolutely right, Mason. When John Daly won at Crooked Stick, that was that was huge at the time. That definitely raised the profile of the tournament for sure. But it's still number 4. It's still number 4 for sure. Okay, WGC. So basically, unless I'm mistaken, it's not a PGA Tour event. It's the WGC are some world events of their own. Whether they're partly owned by the PGA Tour, I don't know. But, there was, basically the top 64 golfers in the official World Golf Ranking list qualify for the WGC Matchplay. If it's not a PGA Tour event, why were the live golfers that are still in the top 64, of which there are not many now, because they're all slipping down fairly rapidly, why were they not allowed to play? I would have thought that if it's not a PGA Tour event, then they should have been allowed to play if the criteria was top 64 in the world. I may have got that wrong. It may be a PGA Tour, a full PGA Tour sanctioned events, but I thought the WGCs were separate and their own kind of entity. But anyway, that's just a side note. I watched quite a lot of it. I have to say I found the group games a little bit boring because, obviously the winner of each group goes through to the knockout, but it's all, it doesn't feel like there's much on the line in the group games. In the third game, it was a little bit better because obviously that was where the decision was going to be made who was going to win the group. Went to a few playoffs, which was great. But I think the group games overall were just a little bit boring. But I have to say, once you got into the actual knockout, it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, you just can't. Why do we not have more match play golf in the pro itinerary? It's so good to watch. It's so great. I mean, whether you like live golf or not, and I understand that it's a very polarizing subject, but their event at the end of last season that was in Miami, that was also match play, between their teams and stuff. That was by far their best event because it was match play. When Phil Mickelson was playing Cam Smith in individual match play, it was fantastic to watch. We should have more match play put into the itinerary. I don't know. I don't know why there isn't. There must be a reason why. Maybe it's because you can't even say it's because the fields are smaller. Because obviously, Live and the PGA Tour are both going down this route now of having more limited fields. So match play would actually suit that really well. But I just think match play is absolutely phenomenal to watch, and I really enjoyed the knockout stages. And I think everyone was just expecting it to be a Rory McIlroy and Scotty Scheffler final when it got to the semi-finals. But blow me, they both lost. You wouldn't have thought that Sam Burns and Cameron Young would have beat them and got to the final, but they did, and fair play to them. So Sam Burns won, and I have to say he was a very worthy winner. When I went back and looked at all of his results, so he didn't lose a game, didn't half a game, not through the whole thing. He won all 3 of his group games. He beat Adam Hadwin 3-2, Adam Scott 1 up, and Seamus Power 2 up in the group game. Then he beat Patrick Cantley 2-1, Mackenzie Hughes 3-2, and then he beat Scotty Scheffler at the 3rd extra hole, and then he actually, won the final fairly easily, 6-5 against Cameron Young. I'm imagining that fatigue has to play a point in this at some point because you are playing so many golf rounds in such a short space of time. So maybe Cameron got a little bit tired, and that's why he just, didn't quite play his best in the final round. But yeah, Sam Burns, very, very worthy winner. He played some phenomenal golf, and it was a great win for him. And $3.5 million going straight into his back pocket. Very nice too. Notables, I thought, was Jon Rahm. I would have thought that Jon Rahm, I would have had him down to definitely make it through to the knockouts. But I have to say that when I went and looked at his group, he had a tough group. He had Ricky Fowler, Billy Horschel, and Keith Mitchell. Keith Mitchell bombs it, by the way. He hits it miles off the tee. He's a good player, very underrated. So actually, Jon Rahm had a tough group there. When you looked at some of the other groups, he got a bit of a raw draw there. I'm not sure how the draw was done. I'm guessing that 1 and 64 went in, and then 2 and 63. I'm guessing it was possibly done like that, but he had a very tough group, so I kind of understood why he didn't make it through. But I don't think there's any worries about Jon Rahm going into the Masters. He's still one of the favourites for me. Obviously, Rory and Scotty Scheffler both look like they are absolutely firing on all cylinders going to the Masters. As we all know, very difficult to defend the Masters. It's only been done twice by Jack Nicklaus and Nick Faldo, so a big task for Scotty Scheffler there, but he's certainly got the form to do it. And I've been saying this for weeks on this podcast. Please, if you don't believe me, go back and watch previous episodes because I have been saying this for a long time, and I am my own worst enemy. I have been saying that Jason Day has been trending for a long time, and once again, he did a really good performance at the WGC. He made it through to the quarterfinals. And I looked at his odds for the Masters back in January when I first started to think, you know what, if he's a former number 1, if he's got over his injury troubles and his body's allowing him to play the golf that he can play, he might be worth a little punt at the Masters. And I remember looking, and he was 100-1. And I did think about putting a little cheeky bet on him. Anyway, I had a look because I've put on here, Jason Day continues to trend outside bet for the Masters. He's not an outside bet anymore. He's come into 22-1 now, but I still think there's some great value there at 22-1. So that's my tip. That's my bet for the week. I'm going to put £10 of my own money on Jason Day to win at 22-1. But yeah, wishing that I put the money on him when I think he was 120-1 back in January. So that also shows you, by the way, the bookies are not stupid. That shows you how he has been trending and how his results have been better. That the bookies have brought him in from outside 100 to 1 into 22 to 1. So I definitely think that Jason Day is worth a punt for the Masters. There's another thing. I'm not a big fan of that golf course they play it on every year. I don't know why. It just doesn't. It doesn't look that great on camera to me. Got a few sort of Mickey Mouse holes. It probably is a beautiful golf course, and if I played it, I'd probably think it was amazing. But for whatever reason, I just think there's better golf courses that they could hold that event on. Okay, so that's the WGC. Well done to Sam Burns. Great result for him, and he continues to move up the world rankings. So now on to another PGA Tour event that was on at the same time. So obviously, there was a lot of golfers that are not in the top 64. And the Corrales Punta Cana Champs was on for that. So this offers an amazing opportunity, because if you win a PGA Tour event, it really can change your life. You get so many exemptions on tour. It takes a lot of the pressure away. You get your tour card guaranteed for a number of years. It's a huge, huge deal. So while all the top 64 are playing in the match play, it offers up a fantastic opportunity to win this event and get, full playing privileges on the PGA Tour, not just for now, but for considerable amount of years to come. It might even be 5 years, And Matt Wallace, a player that's well known to, us Brits. He's an English golfer. He's been performing for many years on the DP World Tour to a very high standard. So no real surprise that he has broken through, but he had been struggling for results for a while. He was playing some amazing stuff going into the last Ryder Cup. It was a really big surprise that he wasn't picked for the last Ryder Cup team, because he Thomas Bjorn, made a big call by not picking him, because he was the form player in the sort of 2 to 3 weeks before that Ryder Cup, and obviously we ended up getting absolutely thumped by the Americans. So I don't think Matt Wallace being in the team would have made a huge amount of difference, but I think a wild card pick for Matt Wallace would have been a far better choice than what he actually went with, which I think was, an experienced player that wasn't an experienced Ryder Cup player that wasn't in particularly good form at the time. So a huge win for Matt Wallace. He's now won on the PGA Tour. Like I say, he's going to get a lot of invites to big events. One thing I was surprised at was I wanted to see what had happened to his world ranking, and I thought, wonder if he's got near to the top 50 in the world rankings now. But I was really surprised. He's nowhere near. He was 175th in the world, and with that win, he's moved up to 117. I really did think that he was a lot higher in the world rankings than that, and I think that probably comes down to how much I rate him and his game from what I've seen, that he's definitely been underperforming. He's a better player than 175th in the world. And it'll be interesting to see what this does for his confidence and see whether he really pushes on from this point. So, yeah, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think about Matt Wallace. And, he's a bit like Tyrrell Hatton with his demeanour. He can be very hard on himself, very hard on his caddy, and that can make him, a little bit unlikable at times, but it's just part of their persona. They're not like that off the golf course. From what I've seen, they're lovely people off the golf course, but that's just part of their makeup when they're actually in competition. Also, good news for the European Ryder Cup team was Nicolai Højgaard came second, one of the Højgaard twins, who again, two phenomenally talented players, the two twins from Denmark, and certainly two, if all the live golfers are not going to be allowed to play in the Ryder Cup, they're definitely two that we need to break through and, get into the Ryder Cup team for this year. So great to see him come second. I'm sure he'll be, a bit gutted that he didn't manage to get the win and get all those playing privileges that Matt Wallace got. But even still, it's a great result for him. shot 18 under, which is, great golf around that golf course. Very tough golf course and very windy, very windy. So I think that probably played into the Europeans' favour because they're used to playing in the wind a lot more. So I think that probably contributed to why there was 2 Europeans at the top of the leaderboard. I always like to come up with some notables from these events, but to be honest with you, I looked through it and there weren't any notables. There weren't really anybody of any note that was playing in it because obviously everyone was playing over in the WGC. But the only one I could find was Joel Damon, who, is my new... I really liked him and Gino, his caddy, before the Full Swing Netflix series, but ever since watching that, he's definitely one of my favourite golfers to watch. So he was playing in it, but he had quite a disappointing tied 50th, and he's a former winner of that tournament as well. So, but apart from that, there wasn't really anyone else to really mention. But great win for Wallace. Be interested to see whether he pushes on from this point forwards. So onto the LPGA. I always like to, make sure that we cover the women's golf as well because there's some great and amazing golf being played on the LPGA. And they had a really big tournament. They had the Drive On Championship, which actually had a total purse of 1.75 million, which is a really big purse for the women's tour. It was won by Céline Boutier, who is a French golfer. She won in a playoff, and afterwards, when they were interviewing her, they told her that she'd just become the most successful French golfer in the history of golf. I've got no idea whether that's... I can't think of another French women's golfer. There might be some that I've just, completely forgot, but I don't think that France has been a hotbed of women's golfers. Obviously, we know that there's a huge amount of women's golfers that come out of South Korea and Asia. But anyway, very well done to Céline Boutier. She's now the most successful woman golfer from France. She won in a playoff against Georgia Hall, who is obviously a Brit and former ladies or women's British Open winner. So it was a great result for her as well. I'm sure she was probably disappointed to lose in a playoff, but again, it's the European Solheim. It's the Solheim Cup this year as well as the Ryder Cup. So good signs there for the European team with both a French and English golfer right up at the top of the leaderboard in a big tournament on the LPGA tour as well. So notables, there was all the sort of the Nelly Cordas and all that. They were all there, but they weren't really contending at the top of the leaderboard. So there weren't really any other notables to really mention. So yes, that's it for this week. That's all I've got. Like I say, next week we will be back here again on Tuesday at 9 p.m. We will do a little bit of looking back on what's happened this coming week. So we'll be looking back at the golf week that was, but it will mainly be a Masters preview. So we'll be talking about who we think are, the favourites, who we think are our outsiders, how we think the live golfers are going to get on, because that's going to be a really interesting dynamic at Augusta. This is the first time that, the live golfers and the PGA Tour golfers are really all coming together to play against each other. And you know what? I honestly think it's going to be all a bit of a storm in a teacup. I think that a lot of the PGA Tour players and the live golfers are going to be just delighted to see each other. There's going to be the odd one that's going to maybe be a little bit contentious. But, I think that, take Dustin Johnson, for example. He's obviously very popular on the PGA Tour. Many of the players have come out and said that, he's the one player that they really miss. He's going to get an incredibly warm welcome from the other particularly the other American players. I'm sure Jon Rahm is going to be absolutely delighted to see Sergio Garcia. They're obviously very good friends. Jon Rahm has consistently said that he thinks Sergio should be in the Ryder Cup team, which is not going to happen because he has, whether he meant to or not, he has alienated himself quite a bit with his behaviour recently. But I'm sure they'll probably play practice rounds together and stuff. I think it'll all be a bit of a. The media will try and play it up. I think they'll really try and make it into more than what it actually is. But I think you'll see a lot of these guys playing practice rounds together and actually just enjoying, each other's company and catching up. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of real ill feeling there, if I'm being honest with you. Kent, Cam Smith to win the Masters tournament. Well, his record is extremely good. We're going to get stuck into this next week, Kent, for sure. So his record would suggest that, yes, for sure. I'm just waiting to see how he plays in the live event that tees off on Friday, because he's been a little bit out of form in the 2 live events so far. He hasn't played terrible. Like Bryson's been terrible. Patrick Reed's been terrible. Now I think that this really long off season that the live golfers have now, and I know they all say it's great, they get to rest, and that old nugget of spend more time with the family and all that, that was definitely what live just told them to say to try and deflect in the early media press conferences, which were obviously very difficult for them in the beginning because they were getting asked a lot of awkward questions. So they obviously just said to them, just tell them I want to spend more time with my family. It was the phrase that they were just rolling out all the time, but I don't think it was ever, true in any real sense, really. But I do think that long off season that they have means that they do start the season, quite rusty, and takes them a little bit of time to get into their stride. So it'll be interesting to see in this week's live event how all of their top players actually play, because Brooks hasn't stepped up yet. Bryson's been struggling, like I say. Patrick Reed's been struggling. Cam's actually been doing all right. He's shot some decent rounds, but he's not been contending for any of the 2 events so far. DJ the same. Phil Mickelson's actually been showing a few little shoots of recovery because he's been in the wilderness. I don't think we fully appreciate probably what a tough time Phil had mentally to deal with everything that happened. And, he brought a lot of it on himself with the way that what he said and the way that he went about it. So, I've not got a huge amount of sympathy for him, but mental health is not a laughing matter, and I'm sure that he definitely struggled with some mental health issues, which definitely affected his golf. But there does seem to be a few shoots of recovery. He's been playing a lot more consistent. His putting's been a little bit better, and make no mistake, when Phil Mickelson walks through the gates at Augusta National, he turns into a whole different animal. So I would never rule Phil Mickelson out whatsoever. But we'll get stuck into all of that in next week's Masters preview, which will be great. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to everyone in the comments saying, you've got to pick a winner, and you've also going to have to give me, your best outside bet as well. Okay, so that's it for this week. Thanks to everyone who's got involved, everyone who's got involved in the comments. I really appreciate it. That's what makes this live podcast, what it is and what I want it to become in the future, is because we can get everyone involved, and, you can actually shape the discussion. So we're going to keep doing them. We're going to keep, sitting down here every Tuesday night. I enjoy doing them. I love, interacting with some of my subscribers. It's great. Your support is very, very, very much appreciated right across the board. And hopefully this podcast, these things always take time. You must never get disillusioned by, a low amount of views or whatever. These things always take time to build. But I just enjoy doing them. I enjoy people getting involved in it as well. So thanks again for all of that. Okay, got some videos coming this week. What have I got coming? I think the Caddy Stories is coming this week. I've still got the Florida Par 3 that we played up my sleeve. Now, I did mistakenly publish that video, and I know a few people did see it before I noticed that I'd done it, and I took it down. that was probably my most enjoyable game of golf I've ever had, and I got it all on film. Me and Grant actually plays golf in that video. So yeah, I think you'll be interested to see Grant actually playing, because Grant was a decent golfer. Grant got down to 3 or 4 handicap. Doesn't play too much now. In that video he talks about his life as a caddy. He talks about his his golf game now. So his life in Jupiter in the winter and stuff like that. So I'm sure you'll enjoy seeing the golf course, which was phenomenal. But I think you'll also be interested on hearing from Grant as well about his life, spending the winter down in that part of the world. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Bill says thanks from the USA. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for getting involved. Appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure the time difference makes it a little bit more difficult for you. So all good, and I will see you sat here next week at 9 p.m. Thanks again.